Hello, BookTube. I got a tiny bit of mail the other day, yesterday, that I thought I would show you. It's the London Review of Books, the new London Review of Books. Thought we'd do a quick, just a quick tour of it. The issue starts off. So the issue starts off, first of all, with a terrific cover. This is a painting by John McNaught. Look at that cover. It's a window open, just a tiny bit, just a glimpse of the much coveted outside world and toilet paper. So that is just wonderful. But the issue starts off with its best piece, a long piece by Adam Tooze, the economic historian Adam Tooze, about the pandemic's consequences for the world economy. It goes on for a few pages. It's beautifully, beautifully written, extremely sobering. I want to read you just a bit of it. There's one part here. The three great centers of production, exchange, and corporate activity in the world are the US, China, and the Eurozone. These economic hubs are tied together through flows of trade organized through complex supply chains that span the globe. Each of the three hubs has a hinterland extending into the neighboring regions in Latin America, East Central Europe, Africa, and across Asia. They are all stitched into a global financial system that uses the US dollar as its currency of trade and credit. Each of these three hubs has characteristic weaknesses. The worry about China is the sustainability of its debt-fueled economic growth. The basic weakness of the Eurozone is that it still doesn't have a backstop for its rickety banking system, and it lacks a shared fiscal capacity. What's more, Italy's finances are so weak they are continually threatening to upset European solidarity. In the US, the national institutions of economic policy actually work. They demonstrated this in 2008, and they are doing so again now. The Fed and the Treasury exert a huge influence not only over the US economy, but the entire global system. The question is how they stand in relation to a profoundly divided American society and how their technocratic style of policymaking is received by the know-nothing, nationalist right wing of the Republican Party and its champion in the White House. Unbelievably sobering to read that and know, oh wait, that's my country that he's talking about. The know-nothing nationalist right wing of the Republican Party. But then he goes through, breaks down this whole thing. It is a magnificent piece. I don't know if it's one of the pieces. Sometimes the LRB will make a piece free online. I don't know if this is one of them if you don't subscribe to the LRB, but it's well worth your time to read the whole thing. And then he gets to the end of his piece and says, and once the crisis is over, what then? How to imagine the restart? Before he was forced to retreat, Trump evoked the image of churches filling at Easter. Will the world economy rise from the dead? Are we going to rely once more on the genius of modern logistics and the techniques of dollar finance to stitch the world economy back together again? It will be harder than before. Any fantasy of convergence that we might have entertained after the fall of communism has surely by now been dispelled. We will somehow have to patch together China's one-party authoritarianism, Europe's national welfarism, and whatever it is the United States will be in the wake of this disaster. But in any case, for those of us in Europe and America, these questions are premature. The worst is just beginning. So it's a great piece, but it won't exactly make your morning, if you know what I mean. But then, of course, I went to the letters page, and I looked at them all, and there was a letter in here that naturally got my attention, in a good way, but also in a bad way. The letter is from J.P. Smith in Beverly Cove, Massachusetts, and J.P. writes, Julian Barnes writes that John Singer Sargent's El Halio, I know some of you are wincing, but I'm using Sargent's pronunciation. Still pleases crowds at the Frick in New York. In fact, writes J.P. Smith, it hangs a bit out of the way at the end of a dark, though quite beautiful passageway at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. And J.P. Smith both pleases me and annoys me. Pleases me because that crucial fact was pointed out, and annoys me because J.P. Smith got their letter into the LRB before I got mine in. I dashed one off right away, saying that no, El Halio is at the Gardner Museum. It's not at the Frick. So that was fun, but I wish it had been me. I try. I am basically Grandpa Simpson. So when I read these periodicals, whether it's GQ or Esquire or London Review or whatever, if I see something, I say something. If I see something that bugs me, something that's wrong, or even something that isn't wrong but that just seems wrong-headed, I fire off a letter. And that's an old habit. I've been doing that for a long time. I did it during the days of manual typewriters and stamped envelopes. I had a manual typewriter in the middle of the desk. I had basically my equivalent of an inbox and an outbox, but I also had a separate area right there on the desk with stamped envelopes for letters to the editor, for official correspondence, not personal letters, not just letters to the editor, but also letters to publishers or whatever. I had a separate set for that. It was a totally different thing, and I did those first. I put business before pleasure when it came to the letter writing part of every day, because the personal letters were so much more fun. So and I would just fire off a note, which is why if you were to scan the penny press going back 35, 40 years in America and in the UK, you would find a great number of letters that have run over the course of time by yours truly. And I still do it. It's so much easier to do now because you can just fire off an email. And I don't do it just to be a pest, although the pestiness is baked right in. I also do it because I have been in the position of being an editor at journals like this. I still am. And you live for it. It's not an annoyance. It's not the way the broader YouTube community, if you want to call it that, the YouTube culture, views comment sections. Broader YouTube culture, if you're over 100,000 subscribers or whatever, typically YouTubers view comment sections as where the vermin congregates. Actually, sadly, that term vermin I heard used by a booktuber about their comment section. Oh, don't feed the trolls. Implying that anyone who leaves a comment on your video is a troll. Just goes without saying. The only people in the world who aren't trolls are your personal friends that you hang out with to talk about how horrible your subscribers are. And although that is rare in BookTube, it's very common in YouTube. And that attitude on the part of YouTubers that now, if I want somebody to look at my comments, I'll pay them to. I'll pay some sort of a slob friend of mine when he's not stoned 12 hours a day. He can look over the comments, but I don't want to do it myself. Come on, man. That attitude doesn't apply in print journals. They want response. They want to feel like they're not operating in a bubble. At least that's what I tell myself. Because I send them letters anyway. I fire things off. And I fired one off about that John Singer Sargent painting. Because if I ever drag you, if you come to Boston, I'm going to drag you to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. You have to see it. And if I drag you to that museum, I'm going to go on and on about that painting and about John Singer Sargent, who painted this immense, absolutely beautiful work of art when he was in his early 20s. What have you done in your early 20s? Anything that you've made in your early 20s hanging in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum? No. And John Singer Sargent, when he was in his early 20s, oh my, BookTube. I don't think you can really tell from the photographs later in his life or from the self-portraits that he did. But oh my, he toured Spain, southern Spain, when he was young. And oh my. Well, anyway, we veered into slight blue territory there, and that serves us well, because the other thing I want to talk about is a review of Cleanness by Garth Greenwell. his latest iteration of his one-trick pony, where a narrator who is him goes to Bulgaria, picks up rough trade, it doesn't go well, then the narrator cries in his cups in a book that you're supposed to buy and that Edmund Wilson is going to call a masterpiece. It's a little bit thin as an operating manual by this point, but it is still going on. I imagine it will go on for the rest of this author's career. And in his latest novel, Cleanness, is exactly that, and it is been getting de facto genuflections everywhere in the critical world. Just utterly ridiculous. Take his name off it, send the same manuscript in a brown paper bag to every one of these gray eminences of the gay lit scene, and they would say, this is boring. This is grindingly dull. No pun intended. But put his name on it, let them know there's a bandwagon to jump on, and all of a sudden, anyway. The review here is by Edmund Gordon, and then the title of the review is Porno Swagger. And that actually touches on a point that he makes. Late in a review that still takes, it's a very good review, very intelligent, but it still takes as its intellectual starting point that Cleanness is a serious book. That Cleanness is a book worth this kind of critical attention. It's not. And I don't like it when a critic won't even examine that starting point. That should be the first place you start. Is this worth me writing about? But it's a brief, and it's LRB money, and I guess that justifies it. Maybe Edmund Gordon actually wanted to write about this book. His review is certainly very intelligent, but annoying. He writes about things that he calls, let's see here, what does he use it? a little continuity in terms of plot, recurring motifs, not laziness. That's what it is. When the same term crops up, when the same image crops up in the course of the same book, it's because the author is being lazy. It's not that the author is being Jamesian. It's that the author is being lazy. But instead, because we have to love this book, we have to take it seriously, we're going to look at its manifest flaws and just interpret them differently. That is just... also, Edmund Gordon goes out of his way in the length of this review to refer to the book's narrator. The narrator does this. The narrator does that. The narrator is Garth Greenwell. Why on earth would we say otherwise? Every scrap of dialogue, every place visited, every party, every food, every piece of information, every location is all real. It's all exactly mimeographed from Garth Greenwell's own personal experiences. Every word that was said by the narrator in Cleanness was said to someone else who, if subpoenaed, would say, no, that isn't the narrator. It was Garth Greenwell who said that to me. I have phone video of him saying that exact line to me. Instead, he has just become this high pope who can't be criticized, and that isn't very bad for the integrity of the bandwagon jumping critics who are doing the praising, and also, I would say, bad for gay fiction. If that isn't too portentous a thing to say, I would say it's bad for gay fiction to have soupy mediocrity praised like this, overpraised like this. But at one point, the title of the review comes from Edmund Gordon concentrates on one particular aspect. It's the closest thing this review gets to criticism of Cleanness. He says, one result of all these second thoughts on the part of the narrator is that we gain a much fuller understanding of the person thinking them. Greenwell's sex scenes are remarkable in capturing what's at stake for his narrator beyond an obvious physical payoff. In one encounter, for instance, he starts out feeling embarrassed by his inability to dominate and ends up dismayed at a well of cruelty he manages to tap. But this psychological realism, along with the fussiness of expression and insistence on clarity of detail, means that the porno setups lack porno swagger. It's a good point. I wish it had been made a little forthrightly more. I mean, if in a piece of gay fiction that is almost entirely concerned and obsessed with gay sex and the explicit description thereof, surely saying that the book lacks porno swagger is a more serious criticism than it's framed in this review. Anyway, I will clip it out. I will put it in my collection of Cleanness, and that was. I don't want to drag. These videos tend to get very long, and I want to drag you on about that. Most of this issue with this great coronavirus cover, I'm saving the cover as well, but to figure out a way not to crease it. Maybe I'll have it. I was going to say maybe I'll have it matted and framed. I'd be happy to do that, but who will do it for me in 2020? We'll have to wait. If a matting and framing shop ever opens again, I would love to frame this. It's a great thing to remind me of what 2020 was. But most of the rest of this issue is long think pieces about how the UK health system is and political system is coping with the virus, with the pandemic. And I don't object to that at all. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, not only in the LRB, but in every other publication. That what is there else to write about? We are, as I've said in many videos, we are all living through this together, and this is history. History books will have pictures of empty Times Square in the middle of a workday. History books will have pictures of empty roads going on forever in the middle of London. We are all staying at home, and most of us are living in non-authoritarian countries. We have just been told, for your own safety and the safety of other people, stay at home. Here are the health guidelines. You are under quarantine. In America, certainly, it's almost entirely voluntary. Some places you can get ticketed. But most places in America, it's people just looking at the bigger picture and saying, okay, well, then I guess I better do this. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'll be fascinated to see what the histories of this time say about it. And we will be in those histories. And maybe not by name, but we are living through this. And that is a different thing, and I would say, oddly, a more hopeful thing than if, for instance, we're all turning on the news first thing in the morning and we hear there's been a massive earthquake in Greece. Well, our friends in Greece are going through that together. They are living through it, and we can donate to help. But we didn't go through it. This is the thing we're all going through at the same time. So I imagine we'll see a lot of long think pieces, and I'll gobble them all up. Absolutely. I'm thinking about making a whole folder of just them to document this whole time. The only other thing of interest, other than that, in this LRB is something that me wanty. I saw this. A book called Native by Patrick Laurie. Just this ad made me want to buy the book. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to start buying books, especially overseas. I don't want to start doing that. I don't want to start doing that. So we will see. It seems curious. I'm curious about it. I'll wait. Maybe there'll be reviews. But that is your coronavirus London Review of Books. Look at that cover. And I just thought you might be of interest, and I like going through my mail with you. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.